Yo, what's good everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode we're looking at a long-time Nintendo 64 import that up until recently has only been available in Japan. We got the sequel for the Wii in 2009 and the series is awesomely strange while highly addicting with its non-stop action and frenetic gunplay. We're checking out Sin and Punishment, developed by Treasure and Nintendo R&D 1 and published by Nintendo, releasing in 2000 for the Nintendo 64. This was added to the Nintendo 64 expansion pack for the Switch in October of 2021 and is the version we'll be looking at today. But before banging on too much more, let's check out how the saga begins. In a dystopian future, the world has reached the point of famine and scientists have developed ways to engineer new species as food sources until they revolt and attack the citizens. A species known as the Ruffians are attacking while the armed volunteers work to harness the power of the threat, but at the cost of oppressing the citizens at large. Rebels Saki and Aaron rise against the Ruffians and volunteers on a bullet-filled cross-continental tour from Japan to the US in hopes of preventing not only hostile takeover, but potential world domination. Gameplay-wise, you got a 3D on-rail shooter where you'll blast everything in sight, and this has the feel of late 90s arcade games. You'll cycle through a couple of characters as the narrative progresses and do a few quantum leaps across time, reality, and the globe. You've got a standard shot which can hit anywhere your reticle can reach, and you can lock onto multiple targets similar to the Panzer Dragoon games. If enemies get too close, you can melee them for heavier damage output, and when enemies fire missiles and larger projectiles, you can volley them right back at them, and that's a mechanic you want to have dialed by the last stage. You'll run through 9 stages all with mid and main boss encounters, and the gameplay comes at you fast. Enemies will mob the screen in a variety of formations, and you can get pretty creative on how you want to dispatch them. Beyond just shooting or giving them the DeLorean backhand, you can double jump and dodge, which you'll also need to be comfortable with since the game is filled with hazards. True to former Treasure, once the shooting starts, things get buck on screen pretty quick. Enemies can also line up on certain parts of the environment, and most of it is destructible, letting you shoot the ground from under some enemy types, which can feed into your combo chains. Chaining and maintaining combos adds insane multipliers to your score at the end of each stage, and the game is fairly generous, letting you keep your combos until you lose a stock. If your energy bar gets drained before reaching the end of a stage, you do lose your combo, but again, checkpoints let you pick up from where you left off, so you don't lose any progress. The stages do get tough, especially after the first couple of levels, but the controls and abilities give you a solid arsenal going in. Though be prepared for the game to throw a few curveballs at you, as this does utilize all the same shoot-'em-up sensibilities you would see in their later releases like Ikaruga and Radiant Silvergun. This even have a few sections where you have free control and a horizontal perspective similar to Gunstar Heroes, so it's neat that Sin and Punishment can swap between viewpoints and keep the action dialed to 11 while not missing a beat. Boss encounters get pretty insane and will switch tactics often, requiring melee and kinetic attacks. These bosses can also dish out tons of damage if you're unlucky, and with main bosses having damage phases and at times multiple forms, until you get their patterns down, you'll get clapped. By the midpoint of the game, you'll be sturdy on the trigger, but enemies tend to match and at times overwhelm you, especially on the final encounter that's an asteroid defense sequence that throws everything at you while you literally try to save the world from certain destruction. You've also got to keep in mind there's also credits, but once you run out of them, it's right back to the beginning of the game. Once again, the game is generous by letting every 100 kills rack another credit, so you can typically stay ahead of a stern game over. Graphics-wise, Sin and Punishment was programmed using Silicon graphics technology and will be one of Treasure's earliest attempts at a fully 3D production, and this honestly smokes for the Nintendo 64 hardware. From the rip, you get fully voiced and animated cutscenes alongside the breakneck action of the game itself. This game has some rather snappy pacing, and the clip of the action remains constant, only giving you moments to breathe once the score breakdown and cutscenes resume. Stages move between sweeping landscapes, tight corridors, horizontal run and gun, and gallery perspectives seamlessly, and is an impressive looking title for the console, which makes it a wonder why they didn't get an international release like Mischief Makers did back in 1996. You can see a progression in their graphic style compared to Mischief Makers, with it being far darker and more chaotic, essentially merging its graphical style with hints of Radiant Silvergun's gameplay, with its use of navigating around and using obstacles and arenas during encounters, so you're getting an interesting mixture of design logic here. There's some fairly detailed surroundings, from the wastelands to the inner workings of train cars and naval ships, to some striking tundras and cityscapes. The game also features dynamic sweeping and almost gunfu style camera work, which looks awesome here. The levels of destructibility are pretty impressive, with a lot of the environment being reactive to bullets. The levels are also short to moderate in length, with runs taking about an hour to complete. Character animations look pretty good for the hardware and are also animated fairly well despite some stiff facial animations during dialogue segments. There's a good amount of unique enemy types and a few dozen damage animations across the game, which follow suit with the often over-the-top Treasure style. You get several dynamic camera angles and composition techniques that add a ton of visual variety, from the surroundings to the characters, which all interact in a fiery on-screen display. Bosses look sick, having encounters of all sizes, with several of these being screen-filling Goliath like the final encounter. A few of these boss encounters will have several phases, and these parts get gnarly when you see the ops take more and more damage and begin to transform. And the encounters in the other dimensions where you play in demon form are also buck. These battles go all over the place, and it always keeps on your toes since most encounters work in new visual and play mechanics. Sound-wise, Sin and Punishment is also fire, with an awesome soundtrack by composer Toshiya Yamanaka, who also worked on Bangayo alongside alongside several projects on the PC-98 and X68000 like ports for Prince of Persia and Air Combat 3. There's some solid grooves in here alongside some hype tunes to keep you blasting through the game's runtime, and right from the rip the tunes are pretty energetic while lacing in some more groovy moments every so often, and it fits the action fairly well here. Combat audio is hefty with shots and explosions being nice and crunchy here with various levels of boom. Enemies also have unique battle cries when in combat, so it's neat seeing the attention to detail between human and non-human enemies. Audio mixing is also smooth without much in the way of competing channels or sound issues, providing a balanced mix of action, voice, and music. There's also a lot of in-game and cutscene dialogue, and as you go through the game you get more of the story. It is quite the tale as Saki and Eren try to save the world, and what's interesting is that Issa from the sequel is seen towards the end of the game. The delivery, while not stellar, is overall decent, and the story itself does have some entertaining twists throughout its narrative. It's crazy to think that an Atmos 64MB cartridge not only has fully voiced cutscenes, but also a well-rounded visual and audio experience to follow suit. To sum it all up, Sin and Punishment is a great on-rail shooter that brings the feel of arcades home with arguably one of the best games for the system. Much like the heavy hitters on the console that push the hardware limits, this one is right there alongside those titles, offering a unique experience that is easy to learn and once you get comfortable takes you on a ride. It has several points where the difficulty may trip you up, but the game is generous with letting you take multiple hits and having fair checkpoints if you do get smoked. While you can run out of continues, you can pick up where you left off now that the menus are translated, but remember once those continues are gone, it's back to the beginning. This is a must play for shoot 'em up fans, and if you can get a copy of the sequel, you've got two great rail shooters to digest. They give you a challenge and an awesome time in the process. Sin and Punishment gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to arcade game and shoot 'em up fans, as this has got something for everyone. It's rare to see this be easily available on the Nintendo Switches and 64 expansion pack, so the need to scour through import bins at your local shop or conventions isn't the only way to play this anymore. If you've got an original Nintendo 64 console, the import cartridge goes for around $50 loose and about $130 for a complete copy. You will have to mod your cartridge port to play it on NTSC console, similar to the tab removal method on the Super Nintendo, so keep that in mind if you want to play this on original hardware. Otherwise, this and its sequel / successor are both great on rail shooters to check out if you're into games like Space Harrier, Panzer Dragoon, or the more recent Air Twister. Treasure really disappoints, so if you're a fan of their work, this is a certified banger and worth a play if not several. And thank you so much if you made it this far into the video. If you find this video helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you use it as a resource. Check back often to have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.